Welcome, welcome, one and all, to this week's creative Photoshop editing tutorial, where you'll learn how to easily piece together different photos of skies to create colorful images that look like this. So first you're going to need an image of something with sections. So I first saw this technique done with a light pole just like this one, but I've also seen it done with things like the wheels of a bike or a chain link fence, where every little section had something different in it. So I encourage you to try and think about a subject like that and use something maybe a little bit different from the norm if you can, or just give this a go and it may spark some other ideas along the way. So we've got our base image, and then we want to start selecting sections so we can place different skies in. Now, when choosing your sky images, I started out first with this one. And what I was trying to think about with this was sort of making it look like it was going from dark to light. And so I started with this, and then I sort of had some darker, almost sunset was almost over, some lighter sunsets, some, midday type shots, and then heading into maybe what could have been a sunrise. That's what I was thinking, but I actually don't like this. I don't really think it worked. So this isn't just a matter of throwing in random skies and hoping for the best. There is a little bit of thought that needs to be put into this. So the next version I tried was this one. And so this was actually a bunch of shots shot in the same location over a period of an hour or so. I just took lots of different shots, and so this was actually the sky sort of going from maybe 4 in the afternoon to kind of 5:30. And I thought that that might work better because they were sort of shot in the same environment. I didn't like this either, to be honest. I did play around with making the light pole look like kind of a silhouette. Works slightly better to me, I think, because now the lighting sort of matches it. But in the end, I didn't like this either. But let's just talk about making this darker. So all I did was put a solid color layer above the light pole layer. So that's how you add a solid color. I chose black, hit OK, and then I just brought down that opacity a little bit just to make the pole lighter. Now it didn't matter about the rest of the skies because we're going to be editing over them anyway. So with this version, then it tried to bring up the saturation. I thought that might help if everything was a bit more bright, and I don't think that worked either. Same with that. I think it just looks even messier, if anything. So then I created this version, and I feel like this one's starting to really get there. It's got that sort of over-the-top look that definitely makes it look like it's sort of more artwork. It's a bit more colorful while still being a little bit muted. And I think the secret here was choosing images that was sort of equally dramatic. So what I did is I went into Lightroom. In my library model, I just typed the word clouds in my search box because when I upload my photos, I usually do stick a little keyword in to help when I'm trying to find images to include in a composite. Not always, but I try. And so I just tried to find images that had dramatic clouds that was sort of equal drama. Mostly colorful ones, but there were a few sort of daytime blue sky type ones as well, as long as they had, a lot of blue sky and a lot of white cloud. I don't have my hard drive plugged in, so these are all a bit of a mismatch and they're not currently loaded, but that's what I was looking for. Equal drama and really colorful. And I think that sort of helped it kind of fit together better. Also, think about maybe including some little birds or the moon or some stars, just give a little bit of extra life to the image. So this was what it looked like before I did any toning, and this is what it looked like after. So it just helps it mesh together a little bit more, gives it that little bit more artsy feel. So let's get into how it was created. So before we stick that kind of solid color layer over the top to darken everything down, what I'd suggest doing is just making some selections of all your different sections. So best way to do this is using, I think I used the magic wand tool. So it is found under the 4th little icon on your toolbar, and we want to hold it down and click magic wand. And then making sure that our base layer is highlighted, we can click in there to get it to select something. Now this hasn't selected all of it, and that's because the tolerance is a bit low. So I'm going to bring it up, and that's looking good. So what I did there is it didn't quite get everything, but it wasn't much more to add in. So I just hold down Shift and click it to add that extra bit. Now to then keep that portion, I just added a new layer and then added a layer mask to it. So now it's just that little section. So then we'll do the same again, making sure that our bottom layer is loaded. I'll probably include this bit, and that's where you need to make some sort of tricky decisions about whether you want them separate or the same. And then I'll make a new layer and add that as a layer mask. And we will continue to do that over and over until we've got a good selection of each section. So select, add a new layer, add the layer mask, go back and over. So I'm not going to keep doing this to show you, but that's just the little gist of things, but I will do maybe a little bit of a more difficult one. So I decided not to keep all these bits by themselves. I thought that would be a little bit too hectic. So let's say I want this strip here. I will highlight that bit, and then I will have to shift click to add all these extra little sections in. So you may need to get a little bit fiddly with some of these. And you will have to zoom in sometimes too to get sort of little holes. We will also have to add in these bits. Whoops. You can just press Control or Command Z to undo if you do the wrong thing. So it can take a little bit of time just to get your selections right, but once they're done, it's really not too hard after that. So I think that's done. Then again, we would add a new layer. We would add that as a layer mask. And so that's what it looks like. And that's what you would do for each of your sections. So then I'll use these 4 just to show you what I did next. But basically I won't be able to bring the images across from Lightroom because they're no longer on the hard drive, but I'll just grab one of these. So what I want to do is bring in whatever image I want to work with, and it can be very mismatched at this point. I didn't really think too hard about what was going to go where because I knew all these images would have the same kind of drama. And then I'm going to Control or Command click whichever portion I want to add it in. So let's say we wanted this one, and then I would add, now that it's reloaded as a selection, I can add it to this cloud layer by just hitting the layer mask again. Now, because it wasn't positioned completely under this, it's only grabbed a little bit. So what we're now going to do, and you're going to do this every time, is hit this link to unlink these two. You're going to make sure the cloud layer itself is selected. Then using our move tool with V, this one here, we can just sort of drag it into position into a part that we like. Now you can see that I have missed a little bit of that selection, so we can just, and here too. So now we'll just have to add them in separately. Making sure that the bottom layer is selected, I can click that, and then clicking back on here, I'll now go to Edit, Fill with White, because we want to add that bit as a white bit to the layer mask, and we'll do the same here again. Making sure that bottom layer is selected, we will click and then shift click. Now making sure that the layer mask, this is a hard bit of Photoshop more than anything. It's just making sure you've got the right thing selected. So we'll add them as white. We will press Control or Command D to deselect. And now that should be looking better. Let's miss this little bit at the bottom. Because it wasn't far enough over. There we go. So that is section 1 done. So then we would grab our next cloud. And this time I might put this one at the top. And it's not quite big enough, so I'll press Control or Command T and then just drag out the edges and give it a tick when it's about the size I want. Then we'll Control or Command click that layer mask. We will make sure that our cloud layer is highlighted, and then we will click that add layer mask, and now it is here. So we've got 2 sections in. We'll just do it with one more, why not, just to give you an idea of what to do. So we've got our 3rd layer in this bit now, and add that as a layer mask. Now we'll unclick that layer. We will move it into position. Where is it? There it is. Probably wouldn't want to put this one there because the clouds were quite dramatic. Like a bigger chunk might work for them. I found these little chunks. I just used sort of a bit nondescript stuff. Let me actually show you. So you can see these were just a little bit more nondescript, the little slithers. And one thing I did also do is sort of try to have like a blue, a darker blue, and then an orange, and then a blue, then an orange, then a blue, orange, blue. So I did try to have a little bit of contrast in there. You know, you may not feel like that works, but that's all personal taste. So you would just have to repeat that process over and over until you've got all your little sections in. So the next thing I did is I individually went through each layer and did some adjusting to it. So let's take a look at one. So basically, as you look through this, you'll see that most layers have either a levels, a hue, saturation, or both. And so what I was trying to do is make the saturation and the brightness sort of match for each image. So let's take a look at one together. So this little section here, I added a hue saturation. And what I did is I just brought up that saturation a tiny touch. And then I added a levels, and that has really made it a lot brighter. So you can see I've brought in the whites and I have brought in the blacks. And that just gives it more contrast, and then played around with the midtones a little bit just to sort of make things match in terms of lightness and color, because anything you can do, even though these are totally disparate images, anything you can do to sort of make them look like they kind of belong together will help. And I thought adjusting the hue saturation and adjusting the brightness would really help with that. So basically, to add one of those, I highlighted whatever layer I wanted to affect. Then I went to my little half pie, I selected levels. Then I made sure it was clipped to only affect this layer and not everything else by holding down Alt or Option and clicking between the two, so it now is only affecting this layer. Then I brought in the brightness. You can play around with other things as well. Just be careful that it is still kind of matching everything. And then if you want, you can do the same. So just click that bottom layer. Then you would go to here and go hue saturation, and then just play around with your saturation. So all little things to experiment with. And I just made sure to do that to each layer. And then this is the toning I did, which kind of what it really does. Whether it's better or not is totally kind of up to you. But what it does is give everything a similar look. So it now sort of looks like they've sort of belonged together a bit better. Now for toning, I tried various things and I found what worked best was using a color lookup. And I'm not sure we've ever talked about color lookup on this channel, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to our filter icon and we're going to go to color lookup. Now, these are called 3D LUTs. I'm not going to go into what those are, but basically you can add them like little color filters. So you click where this 3D LUT bit is, and you can click one. Then if you want to cycle through the looks, you can use the right arrow key on your keyboard just to see what looks okay. Didn't mind this one, but you wouldn't ever use it really probably this strong. So you would bring down the opacity, and I usually bring it down to about 30%. So this is actually the one I ended up using in the end. But I just thought it sort of gave it a kind of a bluish tone that tied everything together, made it just a tiny bit kind of pastel-y, and you can then play with that opacity to taste. Then I just played around with saturation a little bit, so I added a hue saturation adjustment, and I'm just a tiny bit less. And the only other thing I'd probably recommend, although you can experiment as much as you like, is to then add a levels adjustment and just play with your whites and darks to see if that helps. Whether you want more or less contrast, totally up to you. So that is before and after. So you can see it just ties everything just a little bit better. It gives a kind of like a candy cane kind of feel, I guess. So that's pretty much it. It's not really a difficult technique. It's just a little bit time consuming and about sort of getting a bit artistic and playing around with things that will work. And that's going to be the hardest bit of this technique. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning is these file sizes get very large because you are working with a lot of images in one document. If you want to fix that, there's a few things you could do, but the first thing I would do is load the crop tool with C. We will set that back to original ratio, and then what you're going to do is delete crop pixels and hit the tick. What that does is it just chops out any of these extra bits of images that are floating around the image. So it just makes your file size a little bit smaller because we won't have all that extra stuff that we're not actually seeing in the final image hanging around. Because these are between 3 and 7 gig for these files, so they are quite large. So just something to be aware of there. So then I wanted to try something a little bit more original because I have seen this power pole type image getting around a little bit lately. But I am also keeping a very close eye on what's happening creatively around the photography industry. And so I decided to use a ladder, and I ended up coming up with this. So this is how this image started out. I then brought in the different portions. That just gives you sort of an idea of what you can do with this technique. So I'd love to see what, unique ideas you can come up with by playing around with this. And it doesn't always have to be skies. Like you could put family members in here, or different landscapes, or travel memories, or something like that. While this technique is a little bit time consuming, it's really quite simple to do with only basic Photoshop selections and masks. But I do encourage you to think about how you can individualize it using a different subject for your base. I can't wait to see what you come up with. So have fun experimenting and come share your creations in my Facebook group. See you next week and happy creating!